I am not related to John Cena, but I like to think that I might be able to body slam him on a good day. The pace of change is unlike anything I've ever seen. What that essentially means is that the machines are getting closer to having five senses like we have as humans. It's insane to believe that just in a couple of years, the entire world has changed.
Hey everybody, welcome back to AI with Bri, the podcast where we are exploring how to learn, leverage, and lead with artificial intelligence. I am your host, Brian Denstead. Thanks for being here. Today, we are diving into the transformative power of AI in the realm of creativity and business growth. Our guest is Pete Sena. He is a serial entrepreneur. He's a creative strategist and founder of Digital Surgeons. Pete has been at the forefront of blending design, technology, and AI to help brands craft compelling narratives and drive demand. From launching Digital Surgeons from his dorm room to advising Fortune 500 companies, Pete's journey is a testament to the fusion of creativity and innovation. He's also the mind behind The Resonance, a venture studio for early-stage SaaS founders, and District, a co-working ecosystem fostering entrepreneurial growth. Pete's mission is clear: help founders and brand leaders design demand by connecting story, strategy, and systems. And you can learn all about Pete at his work at petesena.com. And welcome to the show, Pete. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. Whoever wrote that, appreciate the kind words. I guess I've been up to a lot in the past 20-something years.
I was going to say, that's an impressive intro. Congrats. But help people out just so, and we'll do this at the end too, but how do you spell Pete Sena where they can find out more?
Yeah, so fun fact. So it's Pete Sena, but most people don't know that. No worries at all. It's S-E-N-A. So PETESENA.com. That's my personal website, and it kind of jumps off to all of my companies from there. I am not related to John Cena with a C, the wrestler, but I like to think that I might be able to body slam him on a good day.
Nice. There you go. Well, apologies for the last name. I've got a tricky one too. So, but again,
I wouldn't even try your last name. I'm just like, hey, Brian.
That's right. Exactly. Well, again, Pete, thanks for being here. I want to dive straight into like the learn segment. So let's start with that. Your extensive experience is overwhelming to me at times. So what is new or surprising in the age of AI that you've learned recently?
I think the way I'd answer that question most directly is the pace of change is unlike anything I've ever seen. And to unpack that a little bit, what I would say is since large language models and the kind of big onset of generative AI, obviously made famous by OpenAI when they first launched ChatGPT back in, I believe, 2022, it's insane to believe that just in a couple of years, the entire world has changed, to the fact where like I'll be in an Uber and, the Uber driver's using ChatGPT while driving the car. And I mean that to say like everyone has reached this point of ubiquity where they're being exposed to these tools on a regular basis. And it's fundamentally shifting and transforming how people live and conduct their lives, personally, professionally, all of the above.
Absolutely. I mean, I think people that have been resistant to it probably don't even realize that they're secretly using it when they do certain activities around here. When you use Yelp or Uber for that matter, there's some AI helping behind the scenes at this point. That's for sure. I know you're so deep into this creative process too. Can you help unpack for us a little bit around, the creative process with regards to AI and what you're seeing in that space too?
Yeah, absolutely. So just for those that I haven't had the pleasure to meet, which is probably most of the people on this podcast, what I would say is I'm obsessed with creative productivity. So the angle that I come at when using these tools is I like to think of this as an army of experts that I can tap into. For most of you that you're probably using ChatGPT or maybe Google Gemini or Claude Anthropic on a daily basis. And if you're not, highly recommend starting to explore those tools. But what I would say to Brian's question is really when I think about how to solve any problem, I think it all comes down to like this idea of the I/O loop or the input-output loop, right? Which is what you put into the AI, the way you frame the question, the way you frame the context, the way you frame the ask, ultimately dictates what you might be able to get back. And what I think is really interesting now with all of these tools is you can use them to generate text, images, videos, so many different things. So at the end of the day, that the way that I approach creativity is by just connecting things, right? One of my favorite ever quotes on it comes from Steve Jobs, of course, famous founder of Apple, where he says, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward. So I think that's a really good thing to remember, because a lot of these large language models, even though many of them now can access the internet with their tool calling, the knowledge that's in them is the knowledge that's in them at the point of training and post-training. So they do make mistakes. They do hallucinate. I tell people all the time that ChatGPT and large language models are basically Clippy on steroids, for those of us that have ever seen Microsoft's Clippy, where he tries to predict the next word. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, yeah, it totally does. And I'm just curious, I feel like you and I are on the bleeding edge of this AI wave that we're riding on. How are you staying up to date with the rapid advancements in AI and design and those kinds of things?
Yeah, one of the things I say to people a lot, Brian, is, how do you acquire taste? You have to taste, is what I always tell people. And I think to answer your question, the way that I'm staying on top of these things is experimenting with all of the tools and really pushing them beyond what I think many of them were designed to do. And asking the AI just different types of questions or different type of results or different types of requests, I think is yielding some new edge cases. And I love just using creativity with these tools to kind of push it. To be more specific, I use this as my business coach, as my life coach, as a way to come up with date ideas or things to do with my toddler, as much as I'm using it to help write statements of work or any of the things that we do as business professionals. So yeah, that's how I find myself using these tools on a regular basis. And I think anybody who says they're an expert is full of crap. But what I would say is I consider myself to be pretty on the know in terms of the latest, greatest. And I think the really tactical answer to the question would be, I just carve out time in my day or carve out time in my week to make sure that I'm staying abreast of these things. And that might look like reading newsletters on the topic. That might look like just getting my hands on and being in the tools. But what I would implore everyone, I know you deal with a lot of executives, is even if you're an executive, even if you're a CEO listening to this, don't just relegate and delegate this to your staff. I highly recommend dive in, spend some time in these tools. You'd be surprised how it might spark some new ideas to really carry your vision forward.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Very, very well said. I have to add, for those of you that are still might be resistant, pay the $20 for one of these tools, because the $20 version versus the free version is night and day. But I absolutely love it. And I think, you have an amazing newsletter as well that you publish with some of the gems that you find each week as well, right? And you can get that on your website. I know I've subscribed to it and I've learned a couple of things, so I appreciate your newsletter on that.
My pleasure. Yeah, no. And for anybody that does check that out, it's on petesena.com. It's a free newsletter, and again, I respond to every email. So if you actually respond to the message you get from me, that doesn't just go to a robot. Though I do have some AI agents that kind of help me with things, but I read every email, and I will respond to every email. So if you have questions or those kinds of things, feel free to reach out. But yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Brian. Really, I like to treat it like a scientist in a laboratory, right? For me, my newsletter is sort of like, I have questions, I have ideas, and I lean into them. A great example of that is just a few weeks ago, I had a colleague of mine saying, he only uses AI for business. So I really quickly built an app that I demoed for him, and I featured in my last newsletter edition, which you might have seen, where it's like, okay, describe who you are, and I'll have an AI generate personal ideas for you to make your life more fun and better. So that's just a perfect example of how these tools can really enrich our lives. And, there's really two narratives going around with AI, right? One, it's going to take over the world and lose all of our jobs. And then the other, it's going to really 10x or 100x, what's possible in the work that we do. So as a knowledge worker myself, and someone who has been a knowledge worker for 20 plus years, I am equally as excited as I am terrified about what these tools mean for the future.
Same here. And I have to say, if you have not used the AI in your personal life, please start. Because like, just open the I did it just the other day. I opened the pantry. I babbled about all the stuff I could see. And I said, I don't know what to make for dinner. Please come up with 3 recipes for me. And it sped out one. And I made this beautiful mushroom risotto. I would have never made it if.
Let me give you a better idea, Brian. So what you can actually do now just is if you open ChatGPT and you're on their newest model and you click on the bottom, you can actually click on a button and it actually has video and video capability where it can see things now. And
nice.
if you can say like,
just take a picture of my pantry.
What do you see? What do you see in the video right now? And it'll basically tell you out loud what it sees and whatever. So rather than just babbling and prompting, what this is referring to, folks, is something called multimodal AIs, which basically means that it's not just text; it can also see image, it can also see video. So what that essentially means is that the machines are getting closer to having 5 senses, like we have as humans. So I love that functionality. Google recently released something where you can stream your screen. So one of the things that I use a lot is if I'm using a new software and I'm like, well, let's be honest, right, Brian? Like all the software manuals suck, right?
That's right. That's right.
Typically, the old world, we just go Google something. Now I just turn on, Gemini, I share my screen and say, hey, how do I do this? And it just tells me. So it's really powerful.
You have to check that one out too if you haven't played with that one, people. So awesome ideas there for sure. I want to move on to the leverage segment here. So how are we actually taking all these cool things that we've been talking about and apply them to enhance our storytelling, our brand, and drive the demand into our businesses? Can you give us a couple examples of how you're actually leveraging these tools into some of the stuff you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. So when I think about AI and how to leverage it most, I think what it comes down to is every business at the end of the day, there's a few ways to grow the business, right? You can grow the revenue, you can grow the profit, the margin. So you can grow the top, you can grow the bottom, grow the middle. I'm a big believer in 10x leverage. Like, how do I get more leverage, more with less, essentially? So one of the things that I'm a huge fan of doing is when I'm working, I'll often turn on Loom, which is just a screen recording software if you're not familiar with it. I know you are, of course, Brian. But I'll just turn that on and I'll be speaking out loud while I'm working. And what I'll then do is I'll take the transcript from the Loom video or the video itself and I'll run it through some of the AIs that I use. And you can use just about any AI. In this case, I think OpenAI or Gemini is probably 2 of the better ones for this particular use case. And I'll basically say, hey, I just did a bunch of work. Can you help me tell me 10 things that I can easily automate to save me time? And I'll ask the AI to tell me how to help me. And it does a really good job with doing that. A lot of times what I'm a big fan of is like to create leverage, back to the sort of, part of the section here in the podcast is, I think it really comes down to anything you do more than once can be accelerated or automated. And I think the way that you start by doing that is just being really mindful of what are the sort of shallow thinking tasks that you do on a daily basis? What are the deep thinking tasks you do on a daily basis? So that's typically how I approach those things. And, I quite literally am using these tools in every aspect of my life. And what we've described today thus far, folks, is really how to use prompting and the LLMs or large language models to come back and give you information. But what people like Brian and I are doing is we're actually scripting these things, right? We're actually creating, multi-use agents that essentially have knowledge and they have tools. So knowledge would just be like, think about like all your documents, think about all your meeting transcripts, right? Tools would be like, I have the ability to call the internet tool. I have the ability to call the weather tool, which are the more kind of popular ones. But I also have a bunch of tools that I've built, like the image generator tool. Most recently, one of my products that one of my companies owns is a tool to help creatives generate visuals and designs, right? So something that would normally be, a 6-figure employee is now being, relegated to the AI at the same quality of taste. And again, all that comes down to by just iterating with these tools and experimenting to say, well, what if I tried this? Or what if I tried that? So what I would say the best thing to do is, again, you got to taste the taste.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that because you get into help people. I'd be curious on your perspective of, like you said, leveraging the GPTs to ask some questions and get some answers versus the AI automation workflows, leveraging the makes, the NANs, those kinds of tools, versus going into that almost full agentic, like you're the orchestrator, go do whatever you need to do to get me the right answer. Like where do you see those use cases I feel like agentic is here, but not quite ready for prime time. Just give us some of your thoughts on those three.
Yeah. So for those that aren't as familiar, so agentic is really just refers to an AI's ability to make decisions automatically. So it has agency. It has its own sort of ability to take action based on a system prompt that you provide to it, based on some parameters or some guardrails. What I would say, Brian, is we're seeing tremendous improvements. I had a company report back to me the other day that we wrapped up an engagement for them about 4 or 5 months ago, and they're seeing like a 22% increase in EBITDA. So I do think agentic AIs in some industries are primetime ready. They're not quite ready for things like healthcare and that sort of thing yet, because a 1% error rate on something could be millions of lives in some cases. But what I do believe is a really possible thing to do is something called human in the loop, which is where you can create a defined problem space of something the AI is trying to do and create a frequency for how often it's going to solve that. Whether it's, when this thing happens, do this thing, or whether it's based, every day at 12 p.m., do this thing. Those are more trigger-based workflows or automation-based workflows. And again, you named a couple of platforms that do that. If we started naming them now, we'd be here for 5 hours.
That's for sure.
But what I would say is human in the loop's a really important thing. So when you're running an agentic workflow, it's always important to validate and make sure that the AI is not hallucinating. And hallucination, if you're not familiar with it, is basically because the large language model is essentially a glorified spreadsheet on steroids, with vectorized information. It's going and trying to fish the needle from the haystack in some cases. And what that basically means is it's going to return the wrong data sometimes. It'd be like if you looked at the wrong row because you're staring at your screen for too long, right? And it makes stuff up. So that's what's called hallucination. And as Brian mentioned, in a lot of cases, what I always tell people is the devil's in the eval, right? The evaluations that you set up, the traces that you set up if you're running production applications is a really important thing, because if you don't get those right, safety can go out the window, alignment can go out the window. And again, depending on how mission critical your solutions are, there's a limit to, I think, the current state of the art where it's at today. But I do believe that any process can definitely be improved or enriched with using these types of tools in the workflow. And I'm specifically referring to generative AI in the context of today's conversation, but obviously machine learning is, has been with us for 30 years at this point. So
yeah, but now it's in the masses of anybody that wants it for $20 a month or for free for that matter. So I'm curious your balance on this leveraging component of, authentic storytelling from our heart, from our memory, and, from the human perspective versus the AI generated content, which can do so well. Like I know I've used AI to help me tell bedtime stories to my kids, and it's phenomenal, but it uncertain, I'm not a creative person, I don't think. I mean, we all are to a degree, but like how do you find that balance between all of the stuff that's in these vector databases has been generated by the humans in the past? We're trying to figure out how do we still give them their rights, their ownership, some tithing for their original thoughts as we feed it into the AI and they remix it on us, et cetera. Like there's some balance between human and AI. Where do you see that falling?
Well, how much time we got?
That's a whole separate episode, probably.
It is indeed, and I'd be happy to come back for it. What I would say, Brian, is everything's a remix.
Yeah.
No matter how you look at it, right? If you were to turn on the Billboard Top 100 on Spotify or Apple Music today, you're going to hear melodies, you're going to hear patterns, you're going to hear remixes, samples of things that have been around for 50 plus years. Yeah. Right. And the same way that the painter hated the photographer and the photographer is hating the Instagrammer and the Instagrammer is hating the LLM because it's just generating images for them. That I think is sort of a fight not worth fighting. And also it's not my fight to fight. So I think that's an area that I do think policymakers and experts in that field. I think it's going to be an interesting field day for them over the next few years.
Yeah.
From my vantage point, I believe that what the future with these technologies in our lives creates is the ability for all of us to be a tastemaker. And you mentioned bedtime stories. I use it for bedtime stories all the time. I generate entire videos with narrative tracks and everything for my son. And what I've experimented with is all kinds of different voices and tones, from Dr. Seuss to different popular children's book authors and that sort of thing, and learning authors. I find the exercise of the creative remix to be really inspiring, because while a lot of the AI generated content, can be AI slop in some cases, which is what people refer to as like crappy AI generated content, I also believe that there is tremendously good things that can come from these remixes. So, what I tell people a lot is garbage in, garbage out. So, if you say, write me a children's story, it's going to go where it wants to go. And it's like playing roulette at the slot, at the casino or slot machine.
For
right?
sure. Yeah.
But if you get really specific, right, I'm looking for a 2-minute, I'm looking for a relaxing story that ends with a lesson in the likeness of Dr. Seuss for my 3-year-old son. His interests are tow trucks, cars, and playing at the park. Generate the story, make sure that the script, when read out loud at normal speed, will take no longer than 2 minutes, because otherwise he'll want more stories. That, as an example, is just better prompting, right? And that taste of me saying, hey, my taste is Dr. Seuss. Your taste might be, another child book author. That's where I think there's something really interesting. And that's where I think we're sort of entering this era. Some people are calling vibe coding or vibe marketing. There's a lot of memes going around about that, but yeah, I mean, I find this to be, as a creative, it's a new uncharted territory where we have access to the world's knowledge at our fingertips at the speed of internet. And it's really powerful. I'll have an idea at 2 a.m. when I can't sleep, and I would never dare message a team member of mine. Though I do have some folks that are all over the world in different time zones, but I can sit there and dialogue with my AI, and then in the morning when my team wakes up, I can have a fully articulated brief ready to go for them.
That's right.
That's highly curated and actionable. That was never possible. Even just 2 years ago, it just wasn't possible. And I think that, to me, is what I'm most excited about, is how it can transform our lives and our businesses. And it's where I'm spending most of my time these days.
I love it. I think the key for me is, it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, right? When we get to true multimodal, you know what I mean? Like you and I walk into the kid's bedroom and it doesn't have that awareness that, hey, we got to get these kids to bed. Hey, I already know he's got his tow truck pajamas on or whatever it is, and we have to, make the story about the tow trucks, et cetera. You know what I mean? So if the AI could see everything, smell everything, all those other things, it would craft the great story. But until then, we have to give it a really strong prompt. And we're going to keep the lawyers pretty busy for the next few years. So I think you're spot on with that one too.
Indeed, but on the flip side, I'll offer something up to, if you are a lawyer listening to this conversation, and now or in the future, you look at how the legal era is being disrupted. I was just with an M&A partner at a large, prominent firm that I do a lot of business with, and he said to me, he needs 1/10 of the amount of associates each year now, because of tools like Harvey and different tools that are really automating the space. So, yes, there will be a lot of policymakers and legal makers required, but I think what is very interesting is that we now have the ability for $20 a month, if we know how to command it, to get $1,000 an hour attorney at our fingertips 24/7, 365. And let's be clear, this is not legal advice. I'm not prescribing them, please. But what I'm saying is that would have never been possible.
That's right.
And I have a lot of friends who have used ChatGPT or tools like it to help them navigate and negotiate contracts and, loopholes and things of that sort. So it's a brave new world. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, pivoting over to the last segment here is the leading segment, which is, I think, one that you excel at for sure. How do we guide others in this AI space? How do you mentor creative leaders to effectively integrate AI in all components of their strategies? Help us unpack the leadership.
I think the leadership principles, great leadership is great leadership. And we can see that a lot of the same patterns emerging if we look at leadership over the past 100 years, right? What I would say is great leadership is about modeling the right behaviors. And I think when it comes to leading in the space of AI, the single greatest way to be able to lead is to create a safe space for failure, create a safe space for experimentation, and to make sure that you and your teams have the space, have the environment to be able to explore some of these things. Because, my favorite example is like people said that AI would never be able to generate images, and there was that really funny meme with the Will Smith eating spaghetti that went around a couple of years ago. And now if you were to use Google VO, which just came out a couple weeks ago, the newest version, you can generate, using whether it's VO or Runway or Luma, you can generate picture perfect videos that are almost indistinguishable from AI versus reality. So I think that is a important boundary, but also at the same time, I think waypoint for us to look at as leaders. And again, it gets back to the core thing, which is to lead, we must lead. And in order to do that, I think it comes back to the principles of leadership, and those things now are being accelerated because of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And how, you're in some of these mentorship roles with some of the places that you work with and stuff. How do you approach coaching people that may be skeptical about AI and its role in our place, or vice versa? Have you seen a success story or two, where AI was used and it really I think you've already given a couple good examples of some of those outcomes because of it. You have an anecdote there?
Yeah, there's a number that come to mind. The few that come to mind is just I've read a bunch of Reddit threads of people who discovered major life-threatening illnesses or life-threatening things, and because of ChatGPT, we're able to diagnose their problem and get medical attention. So those things are pretty rampant on the internet. Those are obviously some of the more, scroll-stopping things with those stories. But what I would say is, whether it's AI or any other type of human progress or human advancement, you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. You can't motivate someone who's not motivated themselves. So I think what we can do is we can set up the conditions of entry. We can ask questions. We can model and demonstrate possibilities and the right behaviors that we're trying to seek in terms of how we do it. But at the end of the day, if someone fundamentally doesn't want that for themselves, like anything, whether it's trying to get someone to eat better so that they can be more healthy, or trying to get someone to use the next AI so that they can help themselves accelerate. And I'll tell you just a quick anecdote here that kind of builds on it. So I go into organizations a lot and I meet people where they're at, and whether it's CEOs or interns and everywhere in between, I teach people. And you brought me in recently for something with one of your customers, and I help people leverage these tools, the tools that they already pay for, the tools that they haven't paid for yet, and use it to drive business outcomes. And a really good example is, and I find this happening all the time, is people don't know what's possible until they see what's possible in a lot of cases. And the thing that I see a lot, we often will go out, we'll do an AI readiness assessment. We have a survey that we complete. Ironically, one of the most common things that we see as to why programs fail and they don't get adopted is because people are afraid if they use the AI, they will lose their job. Now, I find that so intriguing because in a lot of ways, if you're not up on top of AI, an AI is
going to lose your job.
Someone using AI is, right?
Yeah.
But what I think is so fascinating about that is that gets back to education, being able to meet people where they're at and say, look, here are some of the tools that we're going to be rolling out. Here's how we are using them today. Here's how we suggest trying them. Do this, don't do this. Here's some examples. Here's some guardrails. Here's a policy, and then go. And I think that the blocker in a lot of cases is fear. Fear of being replaced, fear of ridicule, shame, etc. And that's like any behavior. But what I would say is, I tell people all the time, if data is the new oil, AI is the new water. I encourage people to be like water.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This has been so enlightening, Pete. I really appreciate you taking some time out to speak with us today. Hit us one more time. What are some great ways for the people listening to get in touch and reach out and learn more?
Yeah. So I think we mentioned it earlier, but my personal website is just Pete Sena. That's Pete, SENA.com. Not Cena the wrestler. And on that website, my free newsletter's on there. My different handles are on there. And I'm pretty much at Pete Sena on just about every channel for the most part. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I post a lot on Twitter X. But I'd say Twitter and LinkedIn and then my newsletter are probably the best ways to reach me. And then, obviously, would love to hear how you folks are using AI and what was most actionable or useful for you today.
That is awesome. Thank you again for sharing some awesome insights with us, Pete, about the AI landscape and creativity. You have an invaluable collection of knowledge locked in your head. So I encourage everybody to reach out and lean on you as they're embarked on your AI journey. So to our listeners out there, if you found this episode enlightening, please subscribe to AI with Bry. Leave a review, share it with some colleagues that are interested in the future of AI and creative innovation, and follow Pete Sena as well. You can connect with Pete once again on his website and follow his thought leaderships on LinkedIn as well. Until next time, everybody, I'm Brian Denstead reminding you to learn, leverage, and lead with AI. Thanks again. This episode of AI with Bry was hosted and produced by me, Brian Denstead. Produced with help from Nancy Velasquez and Kelly Lopez. Video by Leo Moralina. Sound AI generated. Find us on all platforms at AI with Bry and visit ai.bry.net for more. Learn, leverage, lead.